if there is any violence that you see in India, that violence is almost foisted upon the Indian people. By and large, the nature of the Indian, and it has nothing to do with Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Parsi. We don't like trouble. We want to be left alone. We place a huge premium on family. We place a huge premium on knowledge, on education. Because of the Israeli situation, more than anyone else, the Indian political class understands what it is to be surrounded by people who are hell-bent on destruction and terrorism. So that conundrum is a uniting factor.
Today, we're joined by businessman and commentator Suhel Seth, one of India's most widely followed public voices. With millions of followers on X, he's been outspoken about terrorism, media narratives, and the changing global order. Today, we'll talk about India's rise, the India-Israel relationship, extremism, and the future of global politics. Suhel, welcome.
Thank you, Daniel.
In a recent interview, you mentioned that after October 7th, Israel had lost the global branding battle. In your opinion, as a branding expert, what do you think Israel did wrong? And why do you think global sympathy for Israel shifted so quickly after the attacks?
I think what had happened was Israel, when October 7, the horrific incidents happened, Israel went to war as it should or as it wanted to. And the narrative was lost almost instantaneously. Because whenever a stronger power unleashes itself on a seemingly weaker power, there is a problem. But the problem was actually quadrupled because of the narrative that here is Israel, instead of, with all its precision, understanding, looking at just Hamas, also in its wake, destroyed Gaza and, children died, women died, hospitals were bombed, schools were bombed. And what's worse is that humanitarian aid for a while was stopped. Now, Israel may have its reasons, but Israel didn't communicate them. And then you had an army of left liberals and, people who, with zero understanding perhaps, then went to town. And what happened in America was that you had universities where the police went in and locked up people, broke up protests. So everywhere the narrative was, here's a very strong power, and look what it's doing to these people. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Everyone knows that. It is even more impungent, and it's a level of responsibility that the state, in this case Israel, has to be even more careful, because that will be the narrative that will be played out. Also, what Israel did then and what it is doing now, in a manner of speaking, is while attempting to divide the Muslim population of the world, you're actually ending up uniting them. Because the constant battle in people's perceptual domain is that, look, this is what Israel is all about, brute power. And it didn't help that you had an ally in Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is a divisive character. He's not a person who unites. He's a person who divides. So you also had the wrong kind of allies. And then that narrative spun out of control. What is surprising to me, Daniel, is that Israel did not factor this element of narrative change in its, as a prequel, as something that they should have factored in. Look, that if we go to war, this is the likely communication scenario. So no scenario mapping, to my mind, was done, which should have been done. Also, it didn't help that you have a very strong leader, strong in body language, strong in machismo, strong in terms of the way he speaks. That also didn't help. If I were Netanyahu, my entire speech would have been more humble, softer. But then Netanyahu was also working not only towards communicating with his country, men and women, but he was also looking at communicating with the world. And that communication imprint, to my mind, didn't go down well.
Do you think that the democracies often lose this narrative battle because they allow criticism while their enemies control the propaganda that comes out?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What happens is a democracy by nature ferments, encourages, a dissenting view. And a lot of countries, like, look at what's happening today. Iran is able to control the narrative for its own people, the UAE. And the UAE, which to my mind did a splendid job when the attacks began, is now getting hammered for locking up people who post videos. So the narrative does change. But look, the human element in communication must be understood. When you're strong, your narrative must be humble. When you're weak, your narrative must be strong and perhaps tinged with arrogance. But when you're strong and you're arrogant, it's a double whammy. And people then say, look, Look at these guys. They've got everything, and now they're hammering people. It's the innocent people who create the red flags in communication across the world. And the narrative, look, Daniel, it didn't only be confined to New York. It spread like wildfire. You had universities across America, condemning these attacks. So what people didn't realize is that these were not attacks of Israel's liking. Israelis were attacked. They were horrifically killed. And in the process, that element was lost. And what remained in the minds of people to this day is that civilians have been killed in Gaza. And also then Trump made that stupid comment about the Gaza Riviera. And then people realized that this was not a serious ideological war or a serious war to prevent terrorism, but it was more to establish control.
Do you think that global media coverage is naturally biased against countries like Israel?
On the contrary, I think Israel, to my mind, has a fair share of positive coverage. But then it didn't help. October 7th, this happened. October 8th, Tom Friedman writes a full-page article in the New York Times saying he was there in Gaza and the things are not portrayed as they are by Israel. And as I said, it's irrelevant who's on your side. What is important is how the narrative then gets changed and how people who have no skin in the game actually begin to own the narrative and amplify that narrative. And that's the issue.
Do you think that Israel's international narrative has become too tied up to this one leader, Netanyahu?
Absolutely. And that is a danger. See, it is good and bad. Go back to World War II. The narrative was tied to Churchill. The narrative was tied to Stalin. The narrative was tied to Charles de Gaulle, to Franklin Roosevelt. So you had 4 or 5 people against whom that narrative was dispersed. Today you have Netanyahu. And look, everyone believes that Netanyahu was doing this also for electoral purposes within Israel. I don't mean the attack was, no one imagined that horrific attack would happen. But post the attack, what happened was clearly seen as Netanyahu playing into the hands of his political compulsions and his, desire to remain in power. I mean, look at what happened yesterday in Israel. All of the world was conjecturing whether he was dead or alive, and then he had to post those pictures of himself and his wife in a cafe. So narratives get taken over. Look, no one, whether individual or state, can own a narrative. You can only control it. When a narrative which is completely antithetical to your needs or to the truth, then you have to give a counter narrative. But it is what you say in the counter narrative that is important. The problem with Netanyahu is he responds, but at times a non-response is a response in itself. You know that old saying, you don't fight with a pig. You get dirty and the pig loves it.
So following what you said, so could Israel improve its global messaging by separating the country's story with Netanyahu's personality?
Absolutely. And what had happened was, Daniel, that after October 7, there was only one voice from Israel. That was Netanyahu. I didn't see any industrialist. I didn't see any of the young people talk, or even if they were, their narrative never got pushed out. The fact that Israel is technologically advanced, the steps that you all have taken in terms of, genomics, science, technology, agriculture, all these are unknown. And sometimes it helps to create an entire pantheon of other voices which represent different streams. I haven't seen one single cultural leader in Israel talk about this, not one. And if he or she has, it hasn't been amplified.
Let's talk about India for a second. How did India's story change once Prime Minister Modi came into power?
So here's what happened. In 2000, from 2004, 2000 till 2014, an impeccably decent prime minister called Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was a technocrat, an academic, but everyone knew while he was in office, he was not in power. It was Sonia Gandhi who was not in office, but in power. So everyone discounted all of that. Also, towards the end of Dr. Singh's tenure, nothing to do with him personally, we had the worst form of corporate and, financial scandals in the country. The country became known as the hub of capital cronyism. And there was a lot of disgust. There was a lot of anger. The non-resident Indian community and the Indian diaspora were also disengaged from the idea of India. What happened in May 2014 when Narendra Modi took over? He made 2 critical announcements. He says, I will not take and I will not allow anyone to take, as in corruption. Second, which is even more important, He said that we will have to go back to our Indian roots to establish our identity all over again. So he was very clear that India's civilizational legacy and its attributes had been lost since independence. Plus, you had the BJP, the party of which he is the leader, which came in with a brute, strong majority. So it helped when he pushed things through. Now, look at some of the things that India has done which are remarkable in any which way. No country in the world has the level of digitization that we have. What did digitization mean? It didn't mean that Daniel can go to a fruit seller and, show his phone and pay the money. That was not the idea. The idea was also to stem leakages in all the direct benefit transfers from the government to the poorest of the poor. Earlier, the leakages were humongous. They were in the region of about almost 30 to $40 billion a year. That got stopped. As a corollary, what happened was India became more and more transparent in the way the government functioned and the way government departments function. You perhaps don't know that today in India, the income tax department, which is a dreaded department anywhere in the world, is faceless. So you can't bribe anyone because you don't know who to bribe. So it's all automated. It's all technology platformed. When you introduce technology, you do two things. You increase transparency and you remove objectivity. Because then it's not that what I feel, it's what the system tells me. And what also mattered to my mind very critically was that Narendra Modi had already done 14 years, 15 years of chief ministership. He knew how to run a state. And India is nothing but a composition of its states. So you had a person who had administrative experience, was tough, was seen to be tough, great orator, and knew exactly what his vision was for India.
Now, many Indians instinctively support Israel. Why do you think that is?
Because I think a lot of the Israelis, after their military stint, would come to India and would come to Goa, would come to Himachal. So there was a familiarity. I think also Indians, by and large, like most people, we are great lovers of the Davids of the world, not necessarily the Goliaths. Plus, there has over time been this warmth between India and Israel, and a lot of credit must also go to the many ambassadors you've sent over the years. So there's a genuine feeling that Israel is good. Also, go back into history. We today have, I think, a large Syrian Jewish community in the south of India. So it's not as if we are new to Judaism or to the Jewish community. It has always been part and parcel of India's community subset. So I think that's the reason. Plus, look, Modi has always been very fond of Netanyahu. I guess their muscularity appeals to each other. The fact that they're strong leaders and the fact that they have terrorism at their borders. Sometimes it is not ideology, but it is compulsions that unite you. We have Pakistan at our borders gnawing at us every day with terrorist activities, just like you have. But remember, India also had a great relationship with Yasser Arafat, and especially Mrs. Gandhi. So for that relationship to morph into the relationship that exists today is a tremendous achievement. And see, Daniel, whether Modi likes Netanyahu or vice versa, these are, to my mind, short-term things. It is the people-to-people love that will outlast all of this. And that's what's happened for a long time.
Now, Jews, as you mentioned, lived in India for centuries, but they lived without persecution, which is something that didn't really happen in the rest of the world. Why did India develop almost no anti-Semitism compared with, like I said, much of the world?
Because that's the nature of India. And that's the nature of our civilizational legacy. Remember, Islam is a recent religion. Sikhism is a recent religion. Hinduism is a way of life. It is not indoctrinated. It is not a doctrine. It's not a diktat. Like if I don't go to a temple, I don't have to go to a temple once a week. I won't get punished. And India, by and large, we are pretty peaceful people. If there is any violence that you see in India, that violence is almost foisted upon the Indian people. Why do you think we don't have revolutions in this country? We've had many reasons to. But by and large, the nature of the Indian, and it has nothing to do with Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Parsi. That's the nature of the beast. We don't like trouble. We want to be left alone. We place a huge premium on family. We place a huge premium on knowledge, on education. And that's another human trait. Look at societies which are well educated. You will see they will not look at fomenting trouble and divisiveness by and large. Go over the world. Look at the world. Look at the Nordic countries. It's not in the Nordic countries as if you're hearing, scenes of daily violence. No. And I think also what's happened is because of the Israeli situation, more than anyone else, the Indian political class understands what it is to be surrounded by people who are hell-bent on destruction and terrorism. So that conundrum also is a uniting factor.
Now, Prime Minister Modi recently visited Israel shortly before the tensions escalated with Iran. He faced some criticism about the optics. Do you think that criticism was fair?
Not at all. See, the problem, Daniel, in India today is we have an irresponsible opposition and an even more irresponsible leader of opposition. Was this Iran, Israel, America war of our making? No. Did we plan the war? No. Are we participants in the war? No. But will we, like the rest of the world, have to suffer because of the war? Yes. It was stupid for some people to say that Modi went to Israel and he came back and 3 days Israel attacked Iran. Netanyahu is not waiting for Air India 1 to land in Delhi and then launch an attack. These attacks are planned well in advance. I mean, as we heard, the Mossad had placed a ring on Khamenei years ago to find out his whereabouts. It's not as if Modi went and placed the ring. A, B, why should the Prime Minister of India not continue his diplomatic forays or outreach or trips, which are well planned, to then say, why couldn't Modi tell Netanyahu not to go to war? Modi didn't know. If I don't know what your predicament is, how can I give you advice? So a lot of the optics were actually done not because they love Israel less, but because they hate Modi more. And I've always said, the leader of opposition in this country, Rahul Gandhi, his hatred for Modi is slowly morphing into a hatred for everything that's good in India. And that's not a good thing for democracy. Look, you cannot have a weak opposition. But at the same time, it's not the business of the government to foist one. Daniel can't go to the market looking for an opposition if you're the leader. It's their problem. But if they don't do anything with grave seriousness, they're the ones who lose. And more importantly, India loses. Because a democracy cannot be anything but underpinned by a strong opposition.
Now, India has maintained relations with Israel, Iran, the Gulf states, all at the same time. Do you think that balancing act is becoming harder?
Not at all. In fact, that balancing act is good. It's good for India. Look, we were the founders of the non-aligned movement. Now the non-aligned movement has gone for a toss. Then you started having blocks. Modi is very clear, and this is what I like in terms of his objective thinking. Modi is clear that he is the Prime Minister of India. He is not the Prime Minister of Israel. He is not the Prime Minister of the UAE, nothing. His first task must always remain is the sovereignty of India and the benefits to the Indian people. So why should he fight? Why do we want? We don't have, resources like America does. And mark my words, America will be hugely hurt by this war. People are imagining nothing's going to happen to America, but it will. Because now the world is more interdependent. Now you've got a situation where Trump yesterday asked for allies to send more ships to accompany those in the Straits of Hormuz. Why? And look at the way the world has refused. So Trump has destroyed every relationship that America had. He has destroyed the image that America had. And he has actually exposed America for what it really is, which is a bully. Earlier, America was smart enough to camouflage that. Today, that camouflage is off. And you can see why things are happening. When Maduro was kidnapped, it was very clear that it wasn't regime change alone, because you didn't change the regime. You just changed the person. So people were very clear that it was done for oil and it was done for Trump Incorporated. And now people are saying the same thing about Iran. And in the process, and let me tell you this is a serious thing. I worry for future Israelis. I worry for your children, your grandchildren. Because what is going to happen is Netanyahu will be dead and gone, as all of us will be. But in the process, what you will leave behind is a legacy of revenge and hatred. You will continue to be the tinderbox that you are. Look, peace is an impossibility, but it's the only possibility of enduring some level of safety. Otherwise, you're always up in arms. I mean, you may have an iron dome, but do you really want your children to grow up under a dome in any which way? No, none of us want it. So we have to come to some level of solutions. And the point that you very rightly made about Narendra Modi, in a strange way, he's the only guy who can actually mediate now across the world. Look at it. He can talk to anyone. The guy who can talk to anyone and who's everyone's friend is the safest bet for you to rely on.
Sure.
Because it's based on friendship.
You've written that terrorism should not be framed as religion versus religion, but as terrorism versus humanity.
Absolutely.
Why is that distinction?
If you remember, Dick Cheney used the preface word called Islamic terrorism. A terrorist is a terrorist. The moment you put Islamic terrorism, if I'm a Muslim, I will also be castigated. I'll be tarred with the same brush. Why should I? Today, India is home to the world's second largest Muslim population in the world after Indonesia. My objection, which I delivered, which I mentioned in a speech day before yesterday in a hill station here in Nainital, why should we even talk about Muslims and Hindus and Christians in the Indian context? We are all Indian. They're as much Indian as I am. They have as many rights as I do. Look, the responsibility to take care of minority communities in any country belongs to the majority. It does not belong to the minority. And the majority must be willing to yield a lot more than the minority is willing to yield. Because the minority already, is a minority and believes that its survival is under threat. I mean, that's how it is. Do you like to walk into a room which has a 600-pound gorilla? No. So these are things that must be tempered through the prism of humanism. The moment you make religion versus religion as the key definer of terrorism, then you're pitting people against people and not an ideology against ideology. Terrorism is an ideological mantra which some of these scoundrels used in order to create war, create terror, disrupt people's lives, and kill. Religion doesn't tell you that. I mean, by that logic, people would say that all the Jews must be conscripted because, Jesus was betrayed by a Jew. By that logic, I can decimate every religion. I can say that the Battle of the Moors, when it took place, or the crimes against humanity which happened with traveling Moors and what happened in Mexico, the Spanish Inquisition, I can then blame all of it on religion. Do you ever mention the religion of Adolf Hitler? No. You mention Hitler. Because here was an evil man who did evil things against humanity. And it is not about Auschwitz or the gas chambers or whatever. It was an evil human being who led an evil empire till he lived. Now, the moment you say, but what was his religion? Then you're casting everyone on the same side as Adolf Hitler, which is A, stupid, B, it's ridiculous.
Why is it that some societies end up glorifying terrorists as heroes, where other societies don't do that?
So that's a great question. My belief is that societies, by and large, mistake and are always mistaken between terrorism and martyrdom. There's a very interesting definition of jihad in the Quran. It says jihad is not an invitation to kill. It's an invitation to die. So it's sacrifice, which the Dick Cheney of the world spun and said, oh, all these suicide bombers are jihadis. That was not. The Quran says that whenever the Quran is in danger, whenever Islam is in danger, there'll be a lot of people who'll be willing to sacrifice their lives. He didn't say that, they'll be willing to stab themselves or stab another person. No, it's about sacrifice. What did Jesus do when he went to the cross? Who did he go to the cross for? Humanity. What did Moses do? What did Guru Nanak Dev Ji do when he founded Sikhism? He talked about Ek Onkar, one universe. Now, societies believe that terrorists give their lives so that they can live. But societies need to change that imprint, Daniel. I am going to be miserable if I'm allowed to live knowing that the person who's giving me my life has actually taken a million others. I don't want that kind of person in my life. And I certainly don't want to venerate that kind of person. People don't know. So the point I'm making is that, yes, you're absolutely right. Societies are taking... Look, terrorism is more romantic than martyrdom. It's a very romantic concept. And the world has venerated terrorists for years. You remember the romanticism that people built around Che Guevara? Continues to this day. So it depends on A, at what inflection point of that society this veneration happens, and B, does the veneration continue? Or do things then come clear and become more accurate in perspective?
Do you think that more young people are being attracted to these extremist ideologies nowadays? And do you think social media has accelerated this radicalization?
Excellent. I have two theories on this. A, I don't know if more people are being attracted to extremism, but more people are enjoying the idea of extreme thinking. And let me explain. In all countries, the opposition in India says it and some other people say it in other countries. Oh, Earlier, religion was private. Now it's out in the public domain, blah, blah, blah. No. You must read a book by Kenichi Ome called The Borderless World. He was the managing partner of McKinsey in Japan. All societies in today's world are interdependent because of technology. Let's say earlier Daniel left Los Angeles, took a ship, and went to Vietnam. He would never hear from his family for months on end because there was no mobile technology, there was no FaceTime video, nothing. Today, I could be away from my country of birth, but I will be in daily contact, if not in a nanosecond manner. So, the interconnected world is actually fomenting more trouble than you and I can imagine. Now, look at, let's say there are 70,000 Iranians in New York. I can take a bet, Daniel, that the discussion in the drawing rooms of New York, where these Iranians are, along with non-Iranians, will be around the war. Everyone has information. Now, the worry is, how do you, A, glean the correct information from fake, and B, how do you interpret that? Sometimes in the interpretation, we let our own agendas surface. And our own, like I've always said, by and large, in India, we never had an issue with Muslims. But the richest of the rich did in India. And if you scratch the surface, those jokers would speak of, oh yeah, we don't like them. Bullshit. It was always there. So what we are also seeing in a quaintly ironic way is while the world is interconnected, strong leaders want to create ring fences around national identity. Trump, for instance, Meloni, for instance. They are very keen on creating very strong national/local identities. Look at what this absolute rogue Sadiq Khan is doing as mayor in London. So you are fomenting trouble by stoking the fires that earlier didn't exist. So absolutely right. The interplay between religion and identity has never been stronger. Let's go back into history. We lost Jesse Jackson 10, 12 days ago. Go back into American history. The black movement was not about equal rights alone. It was about understanding the predicament of isolationary behavior by society. When a society began to isolate the African American, you knew, whether it was a Rosa Parks or a Martin Luther King, you knew what happened. And when Martin Luther King said, let us sit at the table of brotherhood, it was not just equality, it was respect. But again, we've forgotten that. Because what's happening, as you rightly said, is in the world of social media, it's about immediacy. It's not about foresight. It's not about interpretation. It's not about knowledge. And I'm a great believer, Daniel, societies that give up on scholarship give up on everything. Then they merely live. It's almost like listening and hearing. Hearing is non-cognitive. If you have ears, you will hear. But will you listen? And for listening, you have to be proactive to engage. You by all means disagree, but you have to be disagreeable? No. By all means dissent, but you have to divide? No. But these are things we are coming to terms with and yet have no solution. Because we have lost, to my mind, two things. Now, you'll kill me if I say, because I'm a recent father. Parental upbringing is missing in the world. Another reason why India and Israel and perhaps India and Italy get along is because the family is a very strong focus of our existence. Parental upbringing has gone haywire. Education has gone haywire. Materialism has replaced everything that you would normally chart out in order to respect a person. It is dominant fear that people are talking about. So these are very serious existential or non-existential issues that societies across the world must grapple with. I mean, you're in Los Angeles. With what face does a Gavin Newsom abuse Trump as he should or shouldn't? That's his problem. When you have homeless people, what does it say about America, which is known as the beacon of giving back and charity and, upliftment of the poor? How can you have homeless people in a city which sells dreams to the world? Los Angeles is the home to Hollywood. You sell dreams all over the world. You are in the same state as Silicon Valley, and yet you can't look after the poorest of the poor. You tell me, Daniel, how difficult is it for the government of California to set up shelters? But is shelters alone the solution? How do you include people and bring them into the mainstream? So all societies in the world have to worry about three things: inclusiveness, integrity, and independence. I cannot but not include you. I cannot but not respect your independence. And I cannot but never doubt your integrity. So if I work on inclusiveness, independence, and integrity, I'm a good society. And ultimately, goodness is all about justice and vice versa. Because justice as you and I know, is ultimately about fairness.
Now, why do discussions about extremism become so difficult in Western societies? Do you think Western societies struggle to have honest conversations about radical ideologies?
You're so right. I've always said the Americas and most Western societies, France, these are hypocritical because they want to say the right thing, even if surreptitiously or overtly they do the wrong thing. They all want to be politically correct. Oh, that everything is fine. It's not. Because the scars of their beliefs will actually come one day to bite them. This whole thing about Hinduism and karma, oh, next birth. No, karma will bite you in your ass in this lifetime. Political correctness cannot be the reason for washing away the sins of society. It could be any society. Political correctness cannot be the cover to incite deep-seated beliefs of hatred. I mean, there's that old saying, with forms of government, let fools contest. That which is governed best is best. So with forms of hypocrisy, let the cheaters contend. That which is untrue will always remain untrue. So why would you want to indulge in some level of political correctness when it yields nothing? It only foments greater trouble.
You criticize the BBC strongly over its reporting about the Air India crash. Why do you believe that Western
Last year.
media... Yeah. So why do you believe that Western media credibility is declining?
See it for yourself, Dad. The BBC is a state-funded organization. Why did you look at the BBC's coverage of what happened in October 7th? You do know that BBC is riddled with anti-Semitism. They had an inquiry, they had an investigation. They're absolute rascals. And they believe because they're independent, they can say anything and do anything and not be called out. On Air India AI 171, before the fires had been doused on that ill-fated aircraft, these jokers were talking about pilot error. Does anyone sitting in London in their studios know anything about aviation that they can comment about pilot error? No. And remember, with BBC, it is always agenda-driven. And I've always said, Britain is more racist than you and I can imagine. It's again deep-seated. On the surface of it, they're very smart, very clever, very polite. When someone is really polite to you, you should worry. When someone is really nice to you, you should worry. Because no human being is all sugar and honey. No human being can be nice all the time. So that's the thing. The BBC has had this habit of saying, oh, we know what's good for the world. Bullshit. You don't know what's good for the world because you don't even know. Sure, there are great programs. I used to love Hard Talk. I used to love Newsnight, but I don't have to agree with everything that the BBC says, and especially when it says it without reason, credibility, or rationale. That's my problem with the BBC. Quite that incident.
Yeah. Well, the reason I brought it up was because of their coverage of Israel is the same thing, like you mentioned. Now, you recently shared a tweet which was criticizing comments by journalist Mehdi Hasan. What concerns you about the narratives promoted by commentators like him?
Yeah, I must have retweeted, but I don't think Mehdi Hasan matters. These are all dark voices fomenting trouble, and they must be disregarded with impunity and without care. There are many like that. We just invited Laura Loomer to India, and it went into a firestorm. So people are, Laura Loomer. I said, who cares? It's a small ecosystem that is either on X or worried about these jokers. They're delusional if they think that they're shaping the world narrative. So that's what I'm surprised. I would have never tweeted against Mehdi Hasan. It's irrelevant. Doesn't matter. And see, all these people, and you have to respect one thing. They must be allowed to have an opinion. But they must be men or women enough to also tolerate a counterpoint. These jokers don't want a counterpoint. They believe they are the epitome of knowledge. They're the fountainhead of rationality, and therefore should brook no confrontation, either intellectually or otherwise, which is just not going to happen.
One of the issues is if you criticize Islam, you're accused of Islamophobia, right? But yet people like Mehdi Hasan comments speaking against non-Muslims. So it's like a little bit hypocritical if you
see, these are all convenient. These are convenient rascals. They want some level of relevance and leadership within their community or within their religion or within their society. So they will say some of the most atrociously stupid things and then expect the world to debate. And the world often falls prey to it. In the process, you're only making this guy more famous and more relevant. See, these guys are itching for a debate because of their irrelevance. So they will say stupid things, outrageously stupid. So then you begin to wonder, oh my God, why is he saying that? That's what they're looking for. They want a Daniel to come out and slam them. But then say, see, now this is Islamophobia. So any counterpoint that you raise to them is Islamophobia. When you agree with them, you'll be told by your left liberals, oh my God, now you're agreeing with the Islamists, which is what the point I made earlier. We have failed to distinguish between religious ideology and individual ideology. Because Mehdi Hasan is stupid doesn't mean Islam is stupid. But these people don't want that distinction. And the counterpoint is often also couched in such a way that it seems you're against the religion and not against the person.
You wrote once that when you visited New York, you felt America had become deeply polarized. What shocked you
Yes.
about that?
I think it's deeply polarized like never before. I've never seen. So I largely visit New York. I mean, I did 14 trips last year. For me, New York used to be the home of liberal thinking and diversity of views. That has changed. And it changed even further when Mamdani got elected. Why he got elected, what he did, that's their problem. He's not my mayor. But I've seen in those drawing rooms, when there was a debate on politics, everyone was deeply involved and debated on the issue. They didn't debate on the personality, on the optics. That has also changed. So the infiltration of dogmas, of diktats has actually entered the streets of New York. And I feel that polarization is beginning to show. Look, two things happened, Daniel. And one is happening in New York on Times Square. One happened in Trafalgar Square in London. All religions should be privately subscribed to and privately adhered to. I'm not interested in seeing a mass of people, praying on a Friday, occupying Times Square, like they've done with Trafalgar Square or done with Tooting in London. This visible religious display is contemptuous. It's not necessary. You can't have an army of Muslims, or for that matter, an army of Hindus take over Times Square and say, to hell with the rest of you. Last year, there was an Indian wedding which went through Wall Street, and everyone went to town. Oh, India's taken over Wall Street. India's taken over Wall Street. No, we were just badly behaved people who screwed up the traffic on Wall Street for that day. So people have got to understand the differentiation and the separation, literally, between church and state. That has kind of diffused, and that's also a worry area.
Now, Jews and Hindus are two of the oldest surviving civilizations in the world. Do you see similarities between them?
To be honest, I don't know enough about Judaism, but the similarities I see is that ideally both societies want to be left alone from a religious perspective. We're not scrappers by nature. We're not people. We're almost always looking for survival. You because of the land issue, we because we were colonized for so many years, we were invaded, we were conquered, and now we want our roots back. We want to recalibrate, reimagine, re-explore our civilizational legacy. So to that end, I totally agree. Both are similar. And that's the case even for Iran. Iran is a civilizational legacy. Go back to Isfahan. I mean, the world's most contributory community, the Parsis, the Persians, came from Iran. So go back into history and you will see that societies, by and large, want to live in peace. No one wants daily strife and daily issues. But then we have people from either within our societies or people from outside who foment trouble and force us to do the things which are totally against our nature, against our civilizational legacy, and against our purpose. That's the worry.
Why do you think some civilizations survive for thousands of years while others just...
I guess it's the way you carry forward the civilization. And two things have to happen. One is you've got to keep contemporizing that civilizational legacy. It must always be relevant and rewarding. It can't be dogmatic. It can't be cast in iron. It can't be something that, you can't waver from. So, whether it's the Amishes or the Mormons, and there are many communities like this who are very very, clear. Doesn't work. I think it doesn't work. Because over time, the younger generation who has even less skin in the game says, why the hell should we follow these things? What does it do for us? And see, we all live selfishly. There's a poll done by Gallup in America about 20 years ago. And they said, in what order do you work for who? So, number one, you work for yourself. Number two, you work for your family. Number three, you work for your community. Number four, you work for society. Number five, you work for your civilization legacy. Number six, you work for your country. So everyone says, I'm doing this for America. It's all rubbish. You are actually doing it for yourself.
Do you think that the West has lost confidence in its own civilization?
I don't think the West. See, you can't use the word West so you have to divide it in countries. Yes, you're right. The concept of civilizational legacy has slowly disappeared from the Western world. Earlier, the Western world was seen as the symbol of hope, prosperity, progress. It was never regressive. What we're seeing in America today, what we're seeing in France today, what we're seeing in large parts of England today is going back in a regressive manner to their historical context. That is my worry.
India is projected to become one of the world's largest economies. What are the biggest opportunities? What are the biggest risks you see
I
for
don't think
India?
there are too many risks. The opportunities are we have to strengthen the weakest link in our social chain. We also have to move from being labor arbitrage economies to a manufacturing economy, which, by the way, Narendra Modi has done a fantastic job on. 92% of all iPhones bought in America are produced in India, manufactured in India. We have to become more and more brand related in terms of our activities. And there's no reason why, when we have such great software minds in our country, why the hell have we not produced a Facebook or a Google? So these are the things. And I was saying in my lecture day before, India has to stop castigating failure. All societies, which are old societies, always have this worry, oh, what if the child fails? And then you become very castigating towards that failure. Societies that perform, that progress, are those that encourage people to fail and bounce back. Failure is not the end of the world. But because of historical context and all, you saw that people would say, he failed in this business, he failed in that job. So that's important.
What do you think that if what can Israel specifically learn from India, if you had to think of?
Number one, humility. Number two, purpose. Number three, sharpness of communication. Look, people may say that, oh, Modi is doing this. But the fact that wherever Modi goes, whichever country in the world he goes, his first or maybe second meeting is with the diaspora. If Daniel's neighbor who's an Indian doesn't love India, why will Daniel? If Daniel's neighbor who's an Indian is not proud to share Indian cuisine with Daniel, why would anyone else? Sometimes the windows to a nation are through people in other nations. So outreach to the diaspora is very important. When was the last time Netanyahu addressed young Israelis in America or young Israelis in India? These are the things they should do. Learn from Modi. It's easy, it's interesting, and it's focused. It's target marketing.
My neighbor is an Indian Jew. He grew up in India, in Calcutta. He
Yeah,
left
I'm
in the
from Calcutta. His
okay.
name.
Well, he's a Iraqi Jew from Iraq, Baghdadi, and he speaks about India with such love. He just said that we left because there were so little Jews left in Calcutta. But, he loves India, and it's actually his daughter's getting married on Tuesday night. And he said, we're going to have an Indian food station.
There you are.
So anybody I speak to that is Indian, they all speak about India with such.
Which is my point. If they don't communicate the goodness of their country of origin, why would anyone else? And why would I need to trust New York Times or the Post? See, the human engagement is the gold standard. Whether you're engaging on what you've done, whether you're engaging on why you're doing it, or whether you're engaging on who you are. And these three things Israel must revisit in the context both of October 7 and what is happening in the Middle East today.
What were your thoughts on Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel? Anything that stood out?
No, I
for
think
you?
it was a great visit. He did what he had to do. He met people. He took a lot of Indian industry members from here. I think it was a great visit.
And do you see Israel and India working more together in the
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see a great partnership between India and Israel. And I see that partnership in three areas: in technology, in defense, and in agriculture. And in all these three areas, both countries would benefit.
What do you think is the biggest threat to the global stability today?
Donald J. Trump. And I mean it. For the next 3.5 years, you can't get rid of him. He can't be impeached. And even if they try and impeach him, it won't work. The problem is when your leader is unhinged, you don't know what's going to happen. Whether you're an investor, whether you're a citizen, whether you're whoever you are, people want predictability. They want to know that when we go to Daniel's home, he will give us a glass of water first, not that he'll slap us. The unhingedness of Donald J. Trump is the biggest problem for America. And he may say, make America great again, but you cannot make America great again when you make the world weak again, because that whole interconnectedness exists. Gone are the days when you can say, oh, I'll be a par unto myself. No. So I think that is important.
You think when historians look back to the era that we're living in today, what do you think they would say?
That it was a time of turbulence, it was tumultuous, and yet humanity scored. You can't take away humanism. To me, Donald J. Trump is a blip on the global human radar. This too shall pass.
Suhel, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for your
so much.
time. I greatly appreciated this conversation. If you want to leave us with a final message, if
No,
there's something,
just stay peaceful, stay safe, and stay happy.
thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye,
For all the
Daniel.
best.
Thank you.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real, it is stored safely, it is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.